and Evan's been quite instrumental in that. Let me bring him up here right now. And Evan, how you doing? Thanks for being on the show, buddy.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
I really appreciate all the help you've been giving me with ISRC codes and the mess that has been significantly reduced with your help. I appreciate it in getting some of my more recent material into the Spirit Production Music Library and in the Vintage C catalog. So make sure if you go to the spiritproductionmusiclibrary.com, spiritproductionmusic.com, make sure you check out the Vintage C. Really great music by myself and Sean Clement, and Cat Herded by Evan here. How did you come to get familiar with or even meet Sean?
So we're both from like the Milford, Mass area, um, about 20 miles outside of Boston. And I knew his family. That our families have been friends for forever. My dad and his dad were playing music together all the time around Milford. And my dad actually he played drums on Sean's first couple recordings, so I knew him that way. And I just graduated all these years later, so he knew him that way. And then all these years later, I graduated from Berklee College of Music in Boston and decided to move out to LA. And my family just were like, "Oh, hey, like you should talk to this guy Sean. He's Jimmy's son." I'm like, "Oh, like yeah, I remember him." So I called him up. He was like, "Hey, yeah, I need help getting all this metadata organized for this library." So that was my first real project with him, and that's kind of how we started.
How long ago was that?
That was in October of 2019.
Wow, perfect timing. So you've had all of COVID to like mass through all of this
Yeah,
metadata.
it's been, yeah, no, it was good for that stuff when you're just sitting at a computer all day, but it's been tough to kind of figure your way through the industry during this.
Mm, yeah, I that's a whole nother show, really.
Yeah.
Checking in with people. I had personally a very fond place to reach out to people and say, what was your COVID like? Like, how was that? Since we're talking about it, I mean, what you were able to work on Sean's things, and how did you take advantage of your time mostly during that time, especially in Los Angeles where everything was just shut down?
Yeah, it's tough because it's like kind of like it was my first real experience being here, so it's hard to not associate LA and everything with just like just no real availability for much work. But so to answer your question though, I spent my time like I went to Sean's and I really like we got through all this library stuff and other things curated around his library and like getting the music all organized and things like that. And so I really learned a lot from doing stuff like that. He has an amazing studio up there too, so I got really familiar with like a lot of like his vintage synths, which we'll see in this track we'll talk about. I really explored some of those sounds in software and hardware form, kind of a combination. But so I've been my real goal is I want to be a video game music composer. So I trying it aside from doing different kinds of like I do live sound, so I do different kinds of sound gigs that way. I edit audio, I record people. I play guitar a lot, and I before COVID was going to all those jam sessions and things like that. But so I've kind of been just it's a combination of as many little tasks as I can do to just get myself going through COVID. But one of the things I was doing in my free time was I'd go on like Twitter and like find people's discords for game developers, and I'm just like, hey, like here's my music. Like if you ever looking for something like this, I love your game. I see like different footage and screenshots and things. So like I love your game, and I'd love to write something for you if you're interested in that. And it's led to a lot of the times it's nothing, but then a lot of the times like it's the best case scenario is like it's a really nice response, whether or not they want music or not. And we have this connection now, and I'm on their radar. And there's a couple other people through other social media too that I just started connecting with. So things have just been very virtual as far as like social media and all this stuff. So it's kind of like I don't know if that's what it's like outside of COVID, but there's probably a large part of it that is. So I'm still
Yeah.
figuring my way through that.
And is that how you stumbled on Brandon Kong with the Clockwork Orange animation?
So Brandon is actually like we've been friends forever, like since like early high school.
Oh, wow.
We went to high school together, and we both went to college in Boston, so we still hung out all the time. Yeah, so he was a student at MassArt, so he was working on this project, and so this is right after I moved to LA, probably also like late October of 2019. Um, and he was asking me just like a couple audio questions about like how he should like work on this video, and it just came up that I'm like, hey, like if you want me to write something, like I would have no problem. I'm actually, this would be really cool for me. um and so he was like, yeah, sure, like I don't know, I can write it if I want, we'll see what happens. And he really liked it and it worked out, and I was like, okay, like I don't know if I did a great job or not, but after seeing he made the video animation after the fact, after the music. So, and then after that, I was like, wow, he really just like like took it to a new level. So that was exciting. So that's how I got involved with Brandon.
Did you take turns at all with, or did he just take your music and write the animation or edit animation to it, or was there a little of both? Did you get a chance to compose to picture at all?
Nope, not for this. I didn't compose to any picture.
Oh,
I think he was probably working concurrently as I sent him like the first version I did pretty quickly, and then I made some changes along the way. And so he just worked through all that on his own time, and it was very impressive.
wow. You
Yeah.
know, one thing did want to, while you were talking about moving to LA and then, COVID hits, was that, well, no, I guess you still saw LA the way it is today with traffic and everything, at 100%. And then COVID hits and it's like down to 20%. Like everything was like, traffic was great. You could get to the valley in 20 minutes, from wherever over the hill you live. What part of town are you in?
Yeah, I'm in Valley Village. So
Oh,
right.
you're in Valley Village. I used to live there.
Yeah.
I love that
Yeah.
little place. Okay, so
Yeah.
from the valley to say,
Yeah.
amoeba music.
I yeah, no, I had to work in Montclair for the first like 5 months maybe being here, and that was like 3.5 hours just like sitting through the worst traffic going out that direction.
Mm.
And I didn't have a car my first month here either, so I had to get to Montclair from a bus, which like again
Oh
just
my
added on. It
God.
was a whole day affair just to get to this like gig.
Oh yeah. It's like
But
going to Europe or something.
yeah. So no, I got familiar with it. Yeah, no, but during COVID, it was nice to without a lot of traffic.
Oh, that's
Probably good
crazy,
for the
man.
air too.
Well, let's this is a minute and 30 seconds. And if you're listening to this on a podcast, you can enjoy the music as well. Although it's to animation. So let me bring this up real quick and give it a spin for Clockwork Orange. And again, I just love this music that you did, man. It's really great.
Thank you.
Really great stuff there, man.
Thank you. I
Um,
appreciate it.
yeah, the music and it just went so good, you know, and these huge skyscrapers with Blade Runner esque. It so reminds me of Blade Runner, not only the Vangelis score, but also the new animation that just dropped last weekend um, on Adult Swim. Really cool stuff, and I'd be hacking away at them if I was you.
Yeah, I'll
Also, you
definitely
know,
check it out.
there's so much great music on Adult Swim, man. Even the cartoons, just like Rick and Morty, and there's a lot of really great stuff out there.
Yeah.
So Evan is going to grace us with the score here. Let me bring it up this way and let you talk about it. I wanted to get. Well, go ahead and tell us how that one. It took you a while to get to that one sound that became the inspiration for this piece. Do you have a name for it, by the way?
For the piece,
Yeah.
I called it Vandustrial, I think, because I needed something to call it while I like worked on it, so I knew which one. Because we talked a little bit, I think, but the original idea that he had was like, well, I really want something like Blade Runnery, but also he's really into Trent Reznor, especially like his work. I think he did work on Gone Girl, that movie that came out a
Mm,
few years ago.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so I'm not familiar very much with Trent Reznor, so he gave me a track, and I kind of just was decided to stick to as much as like that track as I could, because I've found that as you start writing, it'll take its own shape naturally. Like, because I'm clearly not Trent Reznor, so I can't replicate that. So I do my best to kind of get started off in that direction, then I'll use my own like kind of devices to get it other places. So yeah, so this was the original idea here that got it started.
And where did you get that from?
So that's actually pretty similar to the track I was going off of, which I should have found the name of it. I can't remember what it was, or if it was even the Trent Reznor one, because he gave me a couple other people. But I just liked the sound of it. So it took me a while to like kind of figure out these patches, which I'm using all Juno 60 style
Oh,
patches.
Juno. Okay. Wow.
For and again, I don't know why. It's just what I had, and I thought they sounded cool. So I decided not to overthink it. So I started just like kind of finding sounds with that, and that's just I play most of my music into a keyboard. I don't write it on paper very often unless I'm doing something specific. So I just had that idea, and that idea kind of just develops all the way through it. But before I knew it, it already got to like over a minute and a half, which is all he really needed. I if I remember correctly. So like all I had to do was spend all my time developing it in that short amount of time. So it was kind of like there was a lot of pressure off of it. So here that's one of the sounds, and I kind of just filled up the space. But one of the key points I got to later on too was this kind of sound here, which I just thought was so cool when I started playing it.
Huh. It's amazing how different that sounds
Right.
from the guitar. It sounds like a guitar hit, like an Andy Summers.
Yeah, I think it's because it's like that voicing he plays on like Walking on the Moon or something.
Yeah, that's
Maybe
it.
that's why I like it so much. But and it has that super rolling chorus going absolutely wild on it.
And then how
So
about the wobbler sound during you know what I'm talking about? It's
yeah,
like the dollar sign type of
yeah,
eyes.
I think it was this one here.
Yeah, what's that? And you're
So
yeah.
I was using that to kind of fill it in because it needed something to ground it. Pretty quickly, my ears kind of led me to that one, and I just like found that patch, and that's what I played, and it worked. Like I think this piece specifically, I didn't overthink. I tried specifically not to overthink any parts of it. I just felt it and did it. So and that's partially why I wasn't in love with this when I was finished with it the first time. It wasn't until seeing the picture that I realized that I think that he made what I did work. For
Mm.
however he did that is pretty impressive. But so that was one of the sounds. So that chariot pad is what I called it. I think that was the name of the patch that was in a preset. That one, it sounds pretty different than it does in the mix, and because
It
things
does.
kind of sit for that long, I spend most of my mixing with automation, and I do that in Pro Tools, so you won't be able to see that here. But it's nothing too complicated. I just make subtle carving points too, because a lot of electronic instruments they're just huge in every way, so it's important for me to kind of carve them out. So the way I went about this is like I heard that sound and it's pretty annoying on its own, but there's something about it, like you were saying, it's a cool sound. So I just decided with an EQ, like I'm just gonna make it is more annoying in the things that like make it really like narrow. And so I did that with probably a decapitator or something, also just distorting it a little bit, or it. So I did that like with the decapitator too, also just like distorting it.
Is that a plug-in, the decapitator?
Yeah, it's by Sound Toys. Yeah,
Is
by
that a
Sound Toys.
compressor or a limiter? What is that?
It's a distortion saturator. It's kind
Oh
of
wow.
all things distortion, pretty much. It's a cool with synths. It's really easy to overdo it, but like I don't care. It's so much fun.
Well, let's listen to it in context. I want to show that part where it comes in.
Yeah.
There's the wobbler. Right there. And then I like the little where the guy hits the knob right there, and then you can hear, and then you hear the bending there, the flywheel. Yeah, that it so sounded. It sounded so like, and it did sound so Andy Summers-ish.
And
That part.
so what I did too that I think makes it pop too. You'll notice every time it comes up, it sounds like it's coming out of nowhere, because it's so simple just to draw like a volume fader or pan pot, whatever you're using, to like just like bring the volume down and just like let it hit every time. So it just sounds like it's hitting from nowhere every time. So that's kind of what gives it, because if not, it's just going to be a wall of frequencies.
Is that the Juno hit, or is that the other sound, the originating sound?
That's the Juno pad that I was just doing. That the annoying
What did you
one.
name it? The Van what?
Oh, this track is just, I called this whole track Vandustrial.
Oh, Van Industrial. Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then the original sound that inspired this piece, you also move that around within the piece, don't you?
Yeah, so those are again same Juno synths. I have them in octaves and they're two separate patches, but here I'll play those again real quick. Has a little bit of pulse at the end too, which I thought was cool.
You know, it's interesting how different this sounds compared to playing it on the video. There must have been some manipulation or a codec or something happening in there that's
Yeah,
creates that.
it's in the mix. I do a lot of things because I'm really focused on composition here, and anything that immediately strikes me as something I want to do, I'll go ahead and commit to it right away. I don't feel like I need a ton of options later on. That just makes it harder to deal with. So that was like the original idea, and there were I probably automated certain octaves or anything coming in, and I had different plugins that kind of come in at certain times, so it gives it a sense of direction. Otherwise it's just kind of bland. You'll notice that this unmixed project here is, in my opinion, it's blander than you would expect from a produced track. But so that, yeah, but that these two lines there, that's was my main idea throughout all of this, and it comes up again, and it's always displaced a little bit. I think it like comes on one, and then one comes in on two, so it feels like it's not the same, but it is one of those things of just a simple development tool. Again, I didn't overthink it. It's really easy to sit here and come up with the most creative thing in the world how to develop these, and it probably would have been cool, but it just wasn't the place for this for me personally. And then the other synths here are all kind of fillers, especially that rhythmic one. this one here. Like it's just a really cool sound, and so I use that to fill the space while everything else is happening. And I'll talk about the percussion in a little bit stuff, the drum tracks, but I use these yellow tracks here are I call them all effects. They're kind of just the same thing as synths, but they're not analog sounding at all. They're a lot more organic. Here, I'll play these two. These remind. Sorry, I just cut myself out. I'll play these two here. These two kind of sounded like Silent Hill 2 to me, which I love that music, so I'll play those a little bit.
Hmm. Yeah.
So you can see I kind of blended. They were probably started off more similar sounding. That they might even be a really similar patch, but what I did is I played one an octave lower, maybe more. I don't remember. And then I also spent a lot of time making sure that they sounded separate enough so that I could play them together and it wouldn't sound like just too much. Like what happens when you mix a lot of electronic sounds is like you get so much of like 200 to like 700 hertz, just like everything has that overlap. Even if it's low or high, you're going to have that area. So it gets way too muddy too quickly there.
How are you mixing that to give some separation? Are you doing a little left, a little right, or?
Well, that's a great question.
Thank you.
I will let you know in 1 second.
Because
I don't entirely remember.
I
So
can't
yeah,
stand when things vie for the same position on the pan wheel, and it's just like, but you want everything to come through. So sometimes, yeah, like how do you get a nice
so
separation with that? Those two
I just
things.
wanted to double check here. I didn't commit to that before mixing, so I definitely did that in a mix. And I can tell you that my usual reaction is going to be the low frequencies. I tend to really want as centered as possible. That's pretty common throughout most styles of music. Um, Anything more fun happening, like the sizzly on the low one, there is some more high information, which is kind of backwards, and the other one's filtered more. So it's basically the first one. I think I might have accidentally flipped it, but the higher one is actually just narrower, and the lower one is bigger. So I may have given that one. I sometimes use like get the low frequencies to come out in the center, and then I can spread out the high one. So sometimes that's duplicating with EQ. Sometimes though, I might just pan them a little bit. I just I can already tell that that would have sometimes been a weird experience in headphones, especially. So I have that one is entirely up to how the patches work. Something else to be aware of is I don't want too many of these sounds to have a really wide stereo field, even if they sound better stereo, because I need to start deciding what really is going to be the where my stereo field is going to go. Let me rephrase it. So something about the stereo field is that I don't want everything to just have this huge sound like wideness to it with, and especially like and when you're in headphones, you're gonna feel like there's just way too much going on and there's no real center to it. So I'm always really aware of that, and it's usually going to be in the mixing stage after this part. But some things I just feel right away, and I'll just commit to it. I'll say, oh, that needs to be mono. Sometimes I do that with like drum kits that are like pretty dry. I know that I don't have a lot of reverb to deal with, which I generally don't do. I don't like baking in reverb before I get to the mixing stage, unless I just think it's a really creative sound. Then I'll do whatever I think is the most creative sound there. But then I also have these hits here. I mean, these are pretty basic. I also have these hits here. These just give it a little.
Yeah, give us one or two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty simple. I'm sure I could have made one like that without having to use a plugin or instrument, but it was there and it sounded cool and it seemed to work. That's probably the least. That comes up last, definitely. Like if it needs any kind of help like that.
What reverb did you use for that?
I'm using pretty much Valhalla Vintage for most of my stuff right now. At this point, this was a couple years ago. I may have been using more impulse response plugins, like which I have a few different like there's one from oh, I don't remember exactly. Bricasti M7, I think. One of my friends had some impulse responses for that, so I've been using those a lot. But I generally now am using Valhalla Vintage Verb, and in my recording session here, um, I often just leave a synth hall as one of their patches, and it's just so huge and amazing. But like I don't often end up using it because it's so big. But I leave it here just so when I'm writing, I can, if I need some quick like space or inspiration, I'll just like there's a bus already set up for that I'll just send it to. I also use it, probably not that patch, but I use it if I'm recording a vocalist and they need some space in their headphones. Um, but that is all. I'm using a lot of Valhalla stuff in the final mix.
Very nice. I like that hit too. That's another one that stood out for me. Is aside from the wobbles and the is the that hit. You know, are you using a kick and a snare in that, or?
So yeah, so I can get to percussion now a little bit. It's basically, I had two drum sets here because I couldn't decide which one would fit better. I kept going back and forth, so I kept them and decided to just in my mixing stage, once I like had a few hours to relax and rest my ears. I went back and carved them out a little more, so a way I can use both. So yeah, so it's kick snare like you would normally think about snare, backbeat, kick on 1 and 3, something like that, like super basic. But then on 4, if you're counting it in halftime, it's kick and snare at the same time. Just it's not supposed to sound like a drummer hitting both of them at the same time, but it's more like a snare with an extra huge sound to it.
Okay.
So I can play those a little bit here. And again, if you were to play that by itself, that sounds like unbelievably like boring.
Right.
And it kind of is, but all the production to it just like had fun. And there was is in the sample or in the setting, I was using Superior Drummer 3 for most of my drums. In this, all of the drums. But there was this like really odd sounding like reverb kind of click. I'm gonna see if I can find it here real quick. So I love that.
What's the little scratch with the? See, I really like that. Adds to the industrialness of it. That the I wouldn't say reverse technology, but you got phonograph record cracks and pops going on.
Yeah, I think that was like one of the tape saturators that like
Ah,
Superior Drummer just had in there, which again, I don't usually mix in the plugin unless it just it's exactly what I was looking for in the moment and it worked. So
yeah,
yeah, so I used that and I probably brought it out more in the mix as well. But that reverb, what I decided to do is like I love that sound so much, but every time I started playing the track, it got lost. So I decided to like dry up everything as much as I could and then left the that snare. I like put a ridiculous amount of like compression on it, but it was like it almost made it sound like a gated reverb because the compressor came after the reverb.
hmm,
And it just left this like droning sound for 1 second and then immediately cut out. So that's pretty much like where I got that sound from. But I was like, I just want to make this as horribly weird sounding as possible in the mix. So that's why I
nice.
just brought it out and made room for it.
Well,
Uh,
Evan, thank you so much for your, good luck on your journey to getting into computer game thing. I'm sure we'll be seeing your name around a lot more. And thank you for all your help with Spirit Production Music. That's
Thank you.
been
No
gnarly.
problem.
That's a whole nother episode talking about
Yeah,
ISRC codes and whatever. But and thanks for also for bringing up the session. It was nice to walk through that and really great stuff.
no problem. Thank you for having me again. It was
I'm
awesome.
going to leave everybody with the last minute here of Clockwork Orange. Thanks again, Evan. Appreciate you having you on the show, man.
No problem.